Hello and welcome. As you continue to develop your skills in research and writing, I wanted to take this episode of the 10-Minute Teacher to help you in developing your thesis statement. As I shared in a previous video, good theological research and writing is about the thinking process. And where that process begins is in the ability to ask good questions and to honestly question everything. Kate Turabian, in her Student's Guide to Writing College Papers, says this: a researcher's most valuable asset is the ability to be puzzled by seemingly obvious things, like the shape of coffee rings, or that the hair on your head keeps growing while the body hair doesn't. Cultivate the ability to question the commonplace, and you'll never lack for research projects. Questioning the obvious is also the first step in critical thinking, which is a skill much prized in the workplace. So if you want to be successful, not just in academics, but in your workplace or any environment, the ability to question everything, to develop questions out of stuff that seems obvious to everybody else, is your first key to success. So let's take, for example, this story out of Genesis 34, in which the sons of Jacob are confronting Shechem and Hamor because they've deceitfully taken their sister Dinah into a marriage relationship. And they've defiled her, and they've defiled Israel by the way they've taken her. So they basically have this plan of tricking them so that they can conquer them and punish them for what they've done. And to do that, they plan this idea that, well, hey, your people are uncircumcised, but if you want to take our women as your wives, you have to be circumcised first. So really then this brings up the question of circumcision. And what is it about circumcision that made Israel so different than the nations around them? And that's where you begin to find your research question by asking, what intrigues you? What causes your friends to ask questions? What ideas, claims, or facts make you think, wow, I didn't know that, or how can that be possibly true? Questions ultimately lead you to important topics. So that leads us to step 2. We need to pick a topic. First, you want to pick something meaningful, a topic that matters to you, and you want to narrow down your topic to a very specific idea. So in this example, which is better, a study of the Old Testament or the book of Genesis? Well, book of Genesis. Well, what about the book of Genesis or the life of Abraham? Well, the life of Abraham is better. It gets more specific. We keep going. The life of Abraham versus the call of Abraham. How about the call of Abraham versus God's use of circumcision in the call of Abraham? So you see how very quickly we went from a very broad topic to a very specific one, each one improving the potential quality of a research project. So after you've kind of narrowed down an idea, the next best thing is to consult at least 2 reference works about your topic. So in my case, I'm going to open up the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary, excellent resource. And in it, I find this article by David Noel Friedman, who says this: in the ancient Near East, circumcision was widely practiced in 2 distinct forms. Certain classes of Egyptian men, especially priests, slit the foreskin to let it hang free. Many men from Western Semitic groups in Syria and Palestine removed the foreskin altogether. The origins of the practice are irretrievable. So he's saying, hey, there's all these groups that used circumcision, and knowing where it started, no one will ever be able to solve that question, essentially. So now that I've researched in a couple of reference works, the next idea is then I have to pick a topic that has a clear issue or problem. To do that effectively, I've really got to discover the issues at stake. How does your topic fit into the big picture of history or culture or religion? What topics are similar to your topic? What are some of the subcategories of your topic? What do your friends think about this topic? Is it interesting to them? Or a what-if question. What if this happened? Or what if this topic were considered today in a different cultural context? All these what-if questions get you really thinking about the deeper issues. So next you'll want to do a 200 to 300 word summary. Write about what you've learned. Write about the basic issues surrounding the topic. But understand, you're not making any attempt to solve, quote unquote, any issues that are coming up in your mind. You're not trying to solve these questions. You're only trying to demonstrate your own understanding of the issues. Once you've done that, you can move on to step 3, which is to formulate your research question. Next, you want to formulate 2 or 3 possible research questions. And how do you do this? Well, of course, you want to narrow your topic down to a specific question. I recommend avoiding things like the standard who, what, when, and where. Instead, really focus on why and how. These tend to be a lot more intriguing, and these generate topics that are far more interesting for research. You also want to consider turning your question into a problem by asking a so what question. And so by finding a question and then turning it into a problem, again, it engages not only your mind as a researcher, but it will help engage the mind of the reader. So moving on from our story in Genesis, a good topic might be circumcision in the call of Abraham. And a question you might ask, one possible one is, did other people groups in the Middle East practice circumcision? If so, why did God choose circumcision as a sign for Abraham? So in other words, if this was a common practice, as one of our books seem to suggest, why did God use something that's common as a symbol to set people apart? Here are some examples of things that would make a bad research question. Anything that the answer is too easily found in a single source. If you can find the answer to your question by opening up your first book, it's not going to be a good research question. Anything that there's only one irrefutable answer. We're not looking to research something that only has one answer that everybody agrees is the answer. Look for something that is controversial or has different opinions. That way you can really dig in and explore your topic. Also, if your research question has too many resources, that means your question is really too broad. So if you're finding thousands of possible articles and resources that all address this question, chances are you've picked something far too broad to be considered. You want to find something that has a good amount of resources, but not so many that everybody else has thought to ask those same questions. This brings us to step 4, writing of your thesis. So what is a thesis then? It's a concise statement of your topic that clearly defines both the purpose and the scope of your paper. So here's an example thesis statement given our earlier study. This paper will examine God's use of circumcision in the call of Abraham as a unique sign of divine covenant in the Near Eastern culture. So here we have the topic, God's use of circumcision in the call of Abraham. We have the purpose, a unique sign of divine covenant, and the scope, which limits the study, is within the context of Near Eastern culture. Another way to kind of visually represent this, and it helps if you maybe write this down for yourself as you're writing out your thesis statement, is to put each of those key phrases into a topic, purpose, and scope statement. You'll also find, as you're writing out these statements, a useful formula from Turabian section 2.4 says, for example, Friedman claims, and then you write what they claim, but this researcher will show what? That shows what you're going to explore. So that's a good formulaic example, and there's others within Turabian. Another way to make sure you have a good thesis statement is to find an issue in blank that raises a question about a specific aspect of blank, whatever you're looking at, whose answer will help explain a larger theme, feature, or quality of blank. Again, you fill in these things. So if you can write this sentence and fill that in a way that makes sense to, say, a friend, so fill this in with your ideas, share it with a friend, and if it makes sense to them, it's probably a good thesis statement. Step 5 then is to write a basic outline. And in your basic outline, it'll identify the main points that flow from your thesis statement. What are the main problems you need to solve? You'll want to write a preliminary 3 or 4 point outline as a starting point for your research, okay? And that's it for the first 5 steps for developing your thesis statement. But you may say, I'm still confused or I'm still struggling with this whole process. Well, here's kind of a little exercise you could do that may help get your creative juices flowing. And this is a little teach it exercise. Choose a task that is familiar to you, making coffee, saddling a horse, making a paper airplane, whatever you understand. Write a set of instructions to teach someone else this task. And then I want you to go and teach someone else to do your task. As that person tried to follow your instructions, what came up? How would you improve those instructions? And as you do that, you'll kind of get your mind thinking about that process of teaching others to understand something that's understandable to you. And that's exactly the same process of writing a research paper. You're taking something that you understand because you've researched, and you're trying to show somebody else how you came to a conclusion. All right, now's a great time to head to the library and begin your research.